Everyone, sorry for the delay. Welcome to the December 12th, 2002 PDC Board of Commissioners meeting. Gina, please call the roll.
Chair Andrews.
Here.
Commissioner Dixon. Absent. Commissioner Moelis.
Here.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Wilhoit.
Here. Thank you. Commissioner reports to begin with, and sorry for the delay today. Commissioner Strauss and I just got off an airplane at noon from Brazil, and it was a great trip. It was organized by the Portland Business Alliance and Greater Portland, Inc. Visited Blount and ESCO and met with a bunch of Brazilian businesses. A lot of opportunity in Brazil, no question. In fact, Steve and I both thought it was so important we paid our own way. So you can't be jealous this time. But it was a terrific trip, and if we miss a beat or two this afternoon, you'll know why. Charles, anything for the cause today?
I was going to say, Commissioner Moelis and I did not just get off a plane from Brazil, so no, happy to hear you had a good time and learned some good things, so we'll look forward to future discussions in that area.
Steve?
I'm good, Scott, thank you.
John?
I've spent the past 2.5 days in Salem for legislative committee days, and I'm sure everybody's aware of the announcement the governor made Monday morning about a new economic development tool that he's seeking that hopefully will create some jobs and new opportunities for one company that's currently in the area, and hopefully some more companies will take advantage of it in the future.
Great. Thank you. Looking forward to that. Thank you. Executive Director report. Patrick.
So I too joined Chair Andrews and Commissioner Strauss on the trip to Brazil. There were over 20 of us, both public officials and private. And as Chair Andrews mentioned, it truly is a lot of opportunity. It's either the 5th or 6th largest economy now in the world. It's obviously the 2nd largest economy in the Western Hemisphere. So it's as important a trading partner. Or potential trading partner as the U.S. could have in the Western Hemisphere. In addition to the visits that Chair Andrews mentioned, we spent a fair amount of time in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro talking with the local business organizations there, our government, our counterparts on the Sao Paulo and Rio side, who work with companies and try and expand opportunities for their companies. And the thing that stands out most is just the amount of investment that's going to happen in the country over the next 5 years between the Olympics and the World Cup, but more significantly as they gear up to tap the recently discovered large oil reserves off the coast of Rio, and just the expansion of the company. I think in the state of Rio de Janeiro alone, there's probably going to be about $100 billion in investment across all industries, shipbuilding and green building, and I mean all kinds of industries that I think that have ties to the Portland economy. So there obviously are challenges doing business in new markets, and Brazil presents its own set of challenges, but the opportunities are significant enough that I think we're going to take what we learned and then plot out some next steps, and hopefully if we do take a next step that involves us going to Brazil, we'll be able to bring down a delegation of companies and having match them up with potential partners and see what opportunities are there. So great trip, great. It's always great to learn about. I had the opportunity to go to China last fall and just to learn about these large markets that are relatively untapped by U.S. and Portland companies. While I was gone, few events. I just wanted to highlight the Portland Seed Fund, which we've sponsored for a couple of years, had its 3rd demo day. That's when they highlight the companies that are in their current class and what they're working on. So there were 8 companies that are currently nearing their graduation, if you will, from the class, and so they presented their latest plans. I understand it went well. We had a lot of representatives there from PDC, and what was great is that the timing of demo day, and it was all coincidental. It was timed along with an article that just came out in Inc. magazine, which featured the Portland Seed Fund as a new model for economic development among cities across the country. It highlighted the work that we've done, as well as New York City, in being public sector partners for private venture funds So it was a great press for the seed fund, but also for the city. Interviewed a lot of companies, and the thing we keep hearing that's gratifying to us, but I think it speaks to kind of a formula that's been working is the startup community. There's a lot of energy, a lot of activity, a lot of private dollars flowing in, and there's a lot of momentum there, but they really value the fact that the public sector, that the city and government in particular, has made it a priority and is willing to put dollars behind its commitment. So that's always great to hear, and they're taking applications for their fourth class. I think the application round closes in early January, so hopefully we'll get another batch of great companies. And then on the 6th of December, our athletic and outdoor industry group we hosted our 3rd annual celebration for that industry. Great turnout, lots of great companies there. They had a silent auction and other things, but just a great opportunity for the industry to come together and talk about innovation within the industry. And I think one of the things that makes this industry locally so interesting, in addition to having the size and scale with our partners in Nike and Columbia and Adidas, is that there is a lot of innovation, product innovation, design innovation going on with the smaller companies. And then I did want to just reiterate what Commissioner Mullis talked about. It was incredibly gratifying for us to hear that the governor is convening the legislature on Friday to take action on this special piece of legislation. We really do believe that there are a handful of large companies that are both here and could be here that have the opportunity to create significant jobs and investment, and I think it's as we compete across the country, it's important that the state and the city and other local governments provides certainty. It's been construed as a tax break or some other type of incentive, and what it really is it's certainty. And when we talk with the business community, that's one of the themes that we hear is that when businesses have certainty and about the regulatory environment, the tax environment, that they can then do their own math and make their own decisions about investments. We hear it a lot in the clean energy space and others, that what they really want is certainty. They don't necessarily need a tax break. They need to know what the playing field is, and then they can make their decisions. So this action by the legislature hopefully will provide that certainty, and we look forward to it. And hopefully it results in Nike making another significant investment in this state, hopefully in this region. And as Commissioner Mullis mentioned, that it would also lead to other companies doing the same. And then really speaking of Nike, the last thing I just want to talk about was that Nike at the same time also announced that they're setting up their own accelerator to help start new companies within their industry, and they partnered with probably the leading organization around the country that runs accelerators. It's called Techstars. There's Techstars in a number of cities, including Boulder and Seattle, and even though there isn't Techstars here in Portland, we've oftentimes partnered with them, and the Seed Fund and others here, the Pi Incubator, they've all partnered with Techstars in Seattle, giving our companies visibility in Seattle. So Nike's partnering with Techstars to set up an accelerator, and we understand it'll be here in Portland to take advantage of all the young companies and entrepreneurs that are here. So exciting news all around. I would normally do the new employee announcements, but just having arrived, I don't have the excuse of just having arrived today, but I don't have my act together on that, so I'll do that next board meeting. We'll have a whole batch of new employees. So thanks.
Great, thank you. So next item on the agenda are the meeting minutes for November 14th, 2012. Any changes or additions? Could I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Hats off award, but I don't see Sarah. Am I missing her? Is she back there? Ah, she is back there. So we're going to do a hats off award, gentlemen. Follow me. So for those of you who don't know, we like to give a hats off award to staff who have done a fantastic job for us. And Sarah certainly fits that bill. So I want to thank you for having the endurance to take on critically important and complex assignments, for having the true project management talent required to complete your work, for making friends and building valuable relationships through cooperative and outgoing work style, for always delivering excellence under very tight timelines. Sarah creates an outline of required actions and assigns responsibilities and correctly anticipates what's needed. Sarah organized a team of coworkers to deliver on a very high-intensity, short-term project connected to a recruitment proposal and presentation. She's tackled complicated redevelopment projects like Centennial Mills and Union Station and the Bud Clark Commons, and contributes on PDC initiatives such as resource development, strategic site analysis, and is implementing the Old Town Chinatown Entrepreneurial District. These traits make Sarah an example to us all of how to embrace the Portland Development Commission's mission and values. Thank you so much.
He didn't say that you can get more information out in a 30-second time than you do.
Thanks so much, Bob.
So now we're going to do public comment for items not on the agenda. I do have 3 people signed up today on 2 different topics, but we have chair for all 3, so why don't all 3 go up? Roger Kurtenrich, Tom Noguchi, and Russell Sanders. You want to start, Mr. Kurtenrich?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Tom and I are here on an item of voting privileges. We are both members of the North Macadam Urban Renewal Committee, and it is my judgment that urban renewal is based on doing 2 things. One is that it wants to get rid of blight, and the other thing it wants to do is raise the tax base. And those of us now that live in the South Waterfront number about 2,000 or 3,000. We are the people that live there, and we are the people that provide most of the TIF money to generate the construction in the South Waterfront. When we have a meeting, Tom is a primary resident, representative of the South Waterfront residents, and he can vote. When he is absent and I sit in his place, your decision has been that I cannot vote. That goes right to my core. I'm really bothered by that, and so are the residents down there as well. I thought I was approved or blessed or anointed. I don't know what procedure you have, but I can think of no procedure that you could do that should negate my ability to represent the citizens down there should Tom be gone. So both of us are here on that issue. So I'll end with that, and I'll turn it over to Tom, and he can add to that.
So my specific recommendation or request of this board is to name Roger formally as an alternate to myself, who is the South Waterfront at-large resident representative member. And I believe that it may be contrary to your existing policy, but it makes sense and, you know, really wouldn't hurt anyone else in terms of naming Roger formally as the alternate member so he can vote in my absence. I've been a member of the URAC for 6 years, and I'm sitting along with him, but my own family priorities and other commitments sort of prevent me from being as regularly attending member. So I think our requests would help solve that issue.
Okay, thank you. I think you know that we're in the process of reviewing how we put the URACs together and trying to align it a little bit better with our current economic development strategy and our mission. And I think it would be good to take a look at the policy with regard to alternatives as part of that process, and I promise you that we'll do that. Roger, I got to tell you, I hear this all the time, and there's a big misconception, I think, among the public in terms of how TIF dollars are raised and how they're spent. And the fact of the matter is, the entire city pays TIF, and it's calculated by district, and then the money has to be spent in districts. But my house, for example, is not in my businesses aren't in districts. That money is pooled and goes into those areas. So sometimes people have a sense that their district is being taxed for this, and that's where the dollars come from, but they don't. They come from the city as a whole.
Sir, I do understand that. I'm a former mayor of Salem, and I've been on urban renewal committees for a long period of time. What I do know is that we pay taxes, and a great deal of that is TIF money that goes into the pot. So all I want to do is have a vote when Tom is absent. And if you decide you agree with me and you change it, fine, that solves the problem. If you do not agree with me, I'd like to know why you don't, because then we'd have to figure out what kind of action we as residents would want to do.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to thank you for volunteering. I do really appreciate the fact that you've spent time to attend these meetings, to participate and speak out. So thank you for your volunteering.
Thank you.
Thank you. Russell Sanders.
Keith, you want to join me?
And Keith Edwards is also just signed up, so thank you, gentlemen. We will definitely get back to you.
Okay. My name is Russell Sanders. I'm here on behalf of the Oregon AFL-CIO. Keith?
My name is Keith Edwards. I'm an international rep for the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
And we're here today to ask to be on the agenda for the next meeting to propose renaming Union Station to be a Philip Randolph Union Station.
And what we'd like to do between now and then, of course, is hopefully schedule some time individually with yourself, Mr. Chairman, and the commissioners to tell you a little bit more about what Philip Randolph was about as far as his life was concerned, but also what we'd like to do with the renaming of the Union Station.
Okay.
So hopefully we can get on the agenda for next month and schedule some time and give you a more comprehensive report on what we'd like to do.
I'd be happy to get together with you and find out. I need to get up to speed in terms of, can we change the name? What is the process that we have to? So I'll have a lot of homework to do, but we can get together sometime in January.
Good. I'm sure you're happy that we came and gave you some more homework.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
You know, if you could send us some information, a biography or something like that ahead of time, I think that'd be wonderful. I'd certainly appreciate it.
We certainly will.
Sure.
Can you give a 1-minute overview, Keith, of who A. Philip Randolph
A.
was?
Philip Randolph was an African American that's born in this country. He was born in April 15th of 1889, and he died May 16th of 1979. He was the labor leader. He was also about social justice. He was about civil rights. He started the first predominantly African American union in this country, the sleeping car porters, and worked for over 17 years with the railroad in negotiations trying to come up with a collective bargaining agreement for that purpose. He also influenced two presidents, President Roosevelt. He forced President Roosevelt to sign an executive order that desegregated the factory workers that was for the work that was being done during the war, during World War II. And because African Americans weren't able to get those good paying factory jobs, and so he got the president to sign an executive order. He also influenced President Truman to sign an executive order desegregating the military as well during World War II. He was the individual that the Big Five, they called him, Whitney Young, Roy Wilkins, the other leaders of the civil rights organizations during the 1960s. They went to A. Philip Randolph to organize the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. He was the one that did that along with Bayard Rustin. And so those are some of the accolades that he has. And he was also the first African American, the first person of color to be a vice president of the AFL-CIO. So those are some of the things that he dedicated his life to, working for rights for people, for workers across this country. And a very dynamic individual in order to influence two presidents to sign executive orders, and we're talking about 60 years ago. So he was, certainly deserves that. This would be the first railroad in this country that would be named and honor him as A. Philip Randolph. In Washington, D.C., there's a bust of him at the railroad, but it doesn't have the significance of having his name on the railroad. And so that would be something that I think Portland would be very proud of.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Question, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Chair Andrews, can I go out of order here? I neglected one thing I was supposed to do as part of my executive director report, and that is highlight in your board packets the we have the collection of all of the URAC budget narratives, and so as we talked about in the board retreat that we held last month, we at this stage in the annual budget process, we go out to each of the URACs and ask for their feedback on the budget priorities, so that there's no draft budget at this stage, but we ask for the URACs for their feedback on the budget priorities. So each of the URACs has submitted those in writing, and so you have these in front of you, and so you can see where so we're not going to go through them, but you can see what each of the URACs has identified as their budget priorities. When we produce the draft budget in January, we will be taking the input that we from the board that we discussed at the board retreat, as well as the priorities that have been articulated by the URACs, and produce the draft budget in mid-January, and then you'll see the draft budget in the end of January at the second board meeting in January at our annual budget work session. And so you have these priorities in writing, so when you see the draft budget, you can look back and say, okay, here's what each of the URACs articulate as their priorities. And then when the draft budget is after it's reviewed by you, it'll actually go to the URACs in February and March, and that's when they'll have the opportunity to weigh in more specifically on line-by-line basis. So that's why this packet of letters is in your board packet this month. So
Okay,
thanks.
perfect. Can we get another copy of these with the draft budget?
Yes.
Just so I don't have to
Yes.
remember them. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next item is an action item authorizing, it's Resolution 6984, authorizing a disposition and development agreement to convey 0.76 acres of real property in Central Eastside Urban Renewal to Key Development Corporation for $1,650,000. Steve Shain and Eric Jacobson. Afternoon, gentlemen.
Commissioners, Chair, Executive Director, Stephen Shain, welcome back, by the way. Before we start the presentation, I wanted to spend a minute to thank those that have helped us bring this document before you. Lisa Gramp has been the attorney. Geraldine Moyle had done some early work on this, and then Eric will certainly has done an excellent yeoman's job. Just a brief introduction is that this furthers the goals and the work that we've been doing on the Burnside Bridgehead, and as it builds upon the work that's underway at Convention Plaza right now. Eric?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Andrews, Commissioners. My name is Eric Jacobson, Senior Project Coordinator with PDC. So we're here today to ask you to approve Resolution 6984, and this is in a disposition development agreement with our development partner, Key Development Corporation. Key Development Corporation has offices in Bend and Hood River, Oregon. The president of Key is Jeff Pickart, and he is here today with us. And I'm sure he'd be willing to share a few of his comments about his vision for this development and answer any questions you may have of him. And the result of this action will be to sell a PDC-owned property at fair market value and to realize the development of a $62 million, 290-unit apartment building. So this slide gives you a sense of some of the history of how we got to where we are today. Outlined in yellow is the entirety of the Burnside Bridgehead property, and then within that there are individual blocks. And the reason the whole property is important is because between 2004 and 2008, we pursued a solicitation process and developer selection process to try to develop the entirety of that property. And during that period, we issued a request for proposals that was a competitive solicitation. Opus Development was selected as the developer, and we entered into a memorandum of understanding with them in 2006. And in 2008, that MOU expired, in large part because it was a very large development, and at that time, the financial markets were having difficulty as we entered into the recession, and that scale of development was just not feasible at the time. And so what we did here at PDC was we re-strategized how to market and develop this property, and we did that by developing the Burnside Bridgehead Framework Plan, which was adopted by the board in 2010. And one of the key principles of that framework plan was, instead of trying to seek one developer to develop the entirety of the property, it was really to emphasize getting smaller developments on smaller parcels and really focusing on reintroducing the circulation network into this area. So what we did after the framework plan was adopted, we issued a request for interest. Again, this is a competitive solicitation seeking development interest for any of these individual parcels. And out of that, Key Development was selected as our development partner, and we entered into an MOU with them in 2011. And since then, between 2011 and now, we've been working with Key to hammer out the details of a disposition development agreement, which we're presenting to you for your approval today. As Stephen mentioned, there have been some recent accomplishments that's really building momentum at the Burnside Bridgehead. In 2010, the Eastside Burnside Couch couplet was completed. It's shown there with the arrow cutting through a portion of the property. In 2012, I think it was September, the Eastside Portland streetcar was opened, which provides service within 2 blocks of Block 67 that we're talking about today. And then most recently, we conveyed what we call Block 68, which is the Convention Plaza property, to Beam Development. And that property, if you've been by recently, is currently under renovation, and it's going quite quickly, and we expect it to be completed by spring of 2013 and open certainly by the middle of 2013. So some of the details on Block 67 specifically, it's 0.76 acres. It's located in the central Eastside urban renewal area. It was acquired by PDC in 2 steps beginning in 1999. There are no environmental or residual environmental issues on the property. There is an easement for the Eastside Big Pipe under the western half of the property, and it has an appraised value of $1.65 million. Here's a view of that property from the Burnside Bridge, so you can get a sense of how the property lays out. You can see, especially from this photograph with Convention Plaza in the background, that the property has 2 elevations. There's a slope running through the property with the eastern half of the property adjacent to 3rd Avenue at a higher elevation than the property abutting 2nd Avenue. And the Burnside Skate Park, which is located under the Burnside Bridge, is located immediately adjacent to and south of this property. So the key disposition development terms are, in terms of financial terms, Key Development is purchasing the property from us for $1.65 million, which is the appraised value. PDC is not providing any financial assistance, and the developer will provide an earnest money deposit of about $90,000 within 10 days of execution of the DDA, and that earnest money deposit will be non-refundable at the end of the due diligence period. What the developer will do in return is, we're anticipating they will develop about a $62 million 12-story apartment building. It will have about 290 market rate apartments, about 11,000 square feet of ground floor retail, and about 175 structured parking spaces. In addition, Key anticipates meeting LEED Silver minimum as part of the project. Here's a snapshot of the development budget. As we mentioned, it's about a $62 million project. Focusing on the financing sources for the purposes of this slide, you can see there that Key is anticipating providing about $3.5 million of equity in the A shares. The B shares of about $15 million, they're anticipating that to be funded through the EB5 program, and a private loan of about $43 million. And it's important for you to know that at this time, none of these funding sources have been secured. And the developer anticipates, as the project moves through the design process, that they would further refine and get those commitments on the financing sources. The primary public benefits are that the sale will generate $1.65 million that PDC can invest in other project and program priorities here in the Central East Side. As Stephen mentioned, there's a lot of activity around the Produce Row Entrepreneurial District and other activities that we'd like to focus on going forward. It's a market rate transaction with no PDC investment. It will result in the development of a currently vacant and underutilized parcel that's consistent with the framework plan and the urban renewal area plan, as well as the economic development strategy, which calls out the Burnside Bridgehead as a key catalytic site in the central city. The housing will complement Produce Row. As you know, PDC hasn't focused on housing projects in the recent past. This really fits in with this area, and one of the things we've heard from the stakeholders is that close-in housing to where people work is really important, and so we think this is compatible with that, and in addition, as part of this housing project, we're not investing any resources in it. The project is anticipated to produce about $450,000 to $550,000 in property taxes to the taxing jurisdictions upon completion. As I mentioned, a minimum LEED Silver status. The PDC business and workforce policy will apply to this project, which will provide opportunities for Portland's diverse population, and will continue to build on the momentum that we're seeing in the Burnside Bridgehead. Just a quick summary of the environmental issues. As I mentioned, we've owned this property for a number of years. In that time period, we've conducted a number of investigations and an analysis, and those issues that we've identified, we've addressed. We don't think there are any residual environmental issues, and the developer is taking the property as is. Some issues and risks that are called out in your staff report that I'd also like to emphasize here are the following. As I mentioned, the developer is anticipating about $15 million in funding through the EB5 program. The EB5 program for residential projects like this has not been used extensively in the United States, and this would be the first project of its type in Portland. Key Development has partnered with Columbia Willamette, which has submitted their application for regional center designation, but has not yet been granted that regional center designation. So we think the timeline and there's some potential, obviously, for them to secure this EB5 funding, but it's something to be aware of. That it's a risk that they may not be able to get that financing. We've had discussions with Key about that, and they have said that they have some alternate equity sources available to them should the EB5 program not turn out to be feasible. I mentioned earlier there'd be about a $45 million private loan that has not been committed or secured at this time, as well as a $45 million loan on about a $60 million project is fairly optimistic. So that's something to be aware of. And again, the developer's aware of that, and they anticipate refining their financing program going forward. Parking. The project is anticipated to be about 290 apartment units and to provide about 175 parking spaces. We've heard, for the most part, favorable response about the fact that the project is going to be providing more than half of the units with parking. Some of the neighborhood stakeholders are concerned about a shortage of parking in this area. We made a presentation to the Central Eastside Industrial Council Land Use Committee last week on this project, and I would say overall the response was favorable, and they think that the amount of parking that the developer is planning to provide seems reasonable and adequate. In terms of the housing market, right now the housing market for apartments is fairly good. Key is anticipating completing this project at the end of 2015, so there's a risk that the housing market may shift between now and then. And then finally, there's a chance and a risk that Key Development won't be able to succeed with this project. And I wanted to point out a couple of the remedies that are in the Disposition Development Agreement. And those are, number one, they are providing us with an earnest money deposit that will be non-refundable. Secondly, if they don't perform prior to closing on the transaction on the property, we have the opportunity to terminate the transaction if Key doesn't meet their major milestones within 30 days. And then finally, if we close on the property and then something happens and Key isn't able to complete the project, we have the right of reentry. In terms of the project schedule, that vertical bar in the middle of this schedule shows where we are today at the end of 2012. Before that, the two stars show that we had the request for interest in 2010 and the memorandum of understanding leading up to this time. Going forward, what we're looking at in the DDA is a maximum 18-month period between execution of the DDA, and closing and conveyance on the property. And during that 18 months, Key Development will be completing all of their design and construction documents and securing all of their financing. After we close on the property, Key's anticipating a construction period of just over a year that would bring the project to completion by about the end of 2015. So that completes our presentation. We're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Before we ask questions, you said the developer is here. Maybe would like to come up and. First of all, thank you so much. It's so great to sit here and talk about a market rate transaction, a construction project without a subsidy from PDC. It didn't seem like that long ago where we couldn't get one done, period. So it's a good sign of the times, and we appreciate your interest.
And maybe times are changing a bit.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit from your perspective about the neighborhood, the project?
Yeah, we've been looking at this project, as Eric pointed out, for the last almost 2 years. And we believe that this project will certainly catalyze and synergize the neighborhood that's there now. We've worked closely with Beam Development and their plans, and we feel that there's, as Eric pointed out, one of the biggest needs in this area is housing. In addition to the housing, which was, I think, left out here, was the second half of the block. The second half of the block, we believe it's advantageous to us to plan that cohesively with what we're doing on the east side. We perceive that to be a good opportunity for some commercial use, not any additional residential use. And one of the other things that we're hearing about the east side neighborhood is that there's not larger plate office space available over there, and we foresee that this west side portion of the lot could meet that need as the area continues to develop.
Great, thank you. Would you mind staying at the table, because I have a feeling there might be some questions from the other commissioners. Before I pass it on, again, great to see the momentum continuing in this neighborhood, especially without a lot of help from us and on a marketplace basis. I'm pretty familiar with the transaction because I've seen it a couple times at FIC. The biggest question that I have is just, is there a backup? Do you have a backup for EB5? We hear a lot about EB5, but
I too am cautiously optimistic about EB5. That's one of our funding sources. It's not the only funding source. We'll see how it goes. We've got equity available should EB5 not work out.
Okay, okay. John, I'm going to start at your end this time.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and obviously I'm pleased to see a market rate transaction come forward. I think that part of the city and neighborhood certainly needs this type of housing, so I'm glad to see that this stuff is starting to pencil again. It's really encouraging. And the one question I had in the briefing, which was answered earlier in Eric's presentation, is there's a timeline through the project that we maintain control and make sure that you're going to build what you're saying you're going to build today. And so as long as those safeties are in place, I'm comfortable with the project. Thanks for taking the time and initiative to try and move it forward.
I might also point out that we're just coming off the heels of a project in the Gorge, which has been 4 separate disposition and development agreements with the Port Hood River. And each of those agreements have been completed on time without extension and as planned.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Strauss?
Well, thanks for coming before us today. It looks like a spectacular project. The views facing back to the city are going to be absolutely incredible, so I think it'll be a wonderful residential project. What are your concerns about the project? Is there a skate park a concern about the project? Is the limit of parking a concern to you? And then finally, we know the apartment market's been great, but it's been overbuilt here. Are you concerned that by the time you're finally finished, you'll have passed the mark?
First, the skate park. We spent actually a lot of time in the skate park. We think that it's an important part of this project, and we need to think carefully about how this project works with the skate park. We have done a market study on residential units in Portland. We did it in 2011 and have continued to update it. It's our understanding, based on the market studies that we have done and updated, that with this project complete, there will still be historically low vacancy rates upon completion. We certainly have some work to do to fleece out the details of it, and for the process of putting this project together, we'll certainly want to be assured that it fits right in the market. So it may scale up or down, more likely down than up. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
Well, and then the questions I had are similar, so they've been primarily answered. And I didn't catch everything you were saying. You said you've done similar projects or not? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You described 4 other projects that you were affiliated with getting done on time or ahead of schedule.
Right. Those are not residential apartment projects. However, we do have experience in post-tension concrete, multi-floor projects similar to this. The projects that we're currently completing out in the Gorge are a series of buildings, 200,000 square feet total, and they will be utilized by companies such as Dakine in the athletic industry, Turtle Island Foods, which was the maker of the tofurkey. Hood Tech is owned by the founder of In Situ. In Situ is the drone maker in the Gorge. Custom Interface, also in the high-tech industry. And all of those projects are coming to close first quarter 2013.
That's all I had, Scott.
Great. Thank you. Look forward to it. I'd look for a motion to approve Resolution 6984, authorizing disposition of development agreement to convey .76 acres of real property in the central Eastside urban renewal area to Key Development Corporation for $1,650,000.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Look forward to groundbreaking.
Yep, good luck.
Thanks. Okay, next item is also an action item. Resolution 6985, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Portland Bureau of Transportation for the construction of the West Burnside and Pearl District Intersection Safety and Access Project in the River District Urban Renewal Area, providing funding in an amount not to exceed $1,879,465. Mr. Bowers and...
Correct.
Not Mr. Jacobson. Yes, there he is. Don't confuse me. I'm easily confused today.
Okay. Lou Bowers, your Central City Division Manager. I'll be making a brief introduction and then turning it over to Ross for the bulk of the explanation, and then Eric Jacobson is joining us at the table. He has been the project manager on this and is prepared to answer any of your other questions about the project. As the chair said, the action before you is a second IGA with PBOT on this project, and the amount of $1.8 million, as you see, a little over that. You earlier funded the 30% design, about $400,000 in the September, I think, action. PDC has been involved with the Burnside Couch couplet for a number of years. We've looked at different configurations. We were successful at building it on the east side, and we have gone through different variations here. So this, I think, you will see as a, I guess I would call a stripped down version of what may be the couplet. I'll ask Ross to go through the details, and then we'll be available to answer any questions. I did want to note that on your last, when you last discussed the project, you asked for a traffic impact analysis, and that is included in your packet from a traffic engineer. And if you read Traffic Ease, you can read that and see what that says. But they did look at the issues pretty clearly. I think there's some people that want to testify on this issue as well. But let me turn it over to Ross at this point.
Thank you, Commissioners. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to go through at a higher level. I'm going to go through the project, and then I know there'll probably be questions where we can drill down. Also with me in the back is Louis Wardrop, who's the city traffic engineer who's working on the project, as we've been working relatively closely with the consultants. So What's that? Okay, so the projects. Wait, how do I do this?
There you go.
Project goals, there we go. Okay, thank you, Lou. The project goals for this project are broken down into 3 bullets that you see right up at the top. Safety improvements at priority intersections. This came out of the Pearl District Access Plan that you guys contributed to over the last year and a half, which was adopted by council in June. Operational improvements in the Pearl District as well coming out of that plan. And then improved access from West Burnside to adjacent neighborhoods. That information has come from over 12 years of planning and study on West Burnside. And the desire that we keep hearing from stakeholders, which is get us left turns off of Burnside into the neighborhoods. Here's a brief, sort of bulleted what I just mentioned and what Lou brought up. The West Burnside Couch couplet, it is currently the adopted plan for Burnside and Couch. Some of the stakeholder input that we have is sort of holdover of 12 years of studying and planning from that. We reached 30% design as a partnership between PDC and PBOT back in 2009. It was shelved due to the economy and a funding strategy that was not feasible at the time. At the time that we put that on the shelf internally at PBOT, we looked at we were answering to some of the critics of the couplet, which said, do we have to mess with Couch? So we looked at internally what would happen if we just did a Burnside only alternative study. And that involved a lot of modeling on how we would meet the demand for turns off of Burnside and what we could do. It got into urban design of 3-lane and 4-lane cross sections, et cetera. So we pulled some of that information out of here. And finally, as Lou mentioned, the Pearl District Plan was adopted last year. At that time, council told us to implement the high priority intersections that were lined out in there, and that's part of this project. So if you break down the scope, there's and relate it back to the goals, you'll see we're adding 5 new traffic signals, and those will predominantly in the Pearl District. Those will be for safety and access. We're modifying 3 existing signals, all on Burnside, 12th Avenue, 4th Avenue, and 3rd Avenue. That'll provide access. And then as well, there's curb extensions that we're adding at 10th Avenue, 4th, and 3rd. I won't probably go into the details of that, but it's the same old, what we would usually do curb extensions for, narrow crossing, and provide storage for large pedestrian movements. Here's a map of the of the project. Again, the area in red is the Pearl District Plan. I'm going to start there, but just so you know, orange are new signals, purple is modified left turns, and the pedestrian improvements, which would be curb extensions, are in green.
Could you go back to this slide just one more?
Sure.
You have a laser pointer, so you can just orient me there a little bit.
Oops, that was a bad. You didn't tell me about that.
I don't know if we have a laser pointer in there.
Oh, that was the wrong.
Let's turn.
The top.
I'm in the top. Oh, there, that top. Okay, yeah, so let me orient you a little better. Good question. Burnside Bridge, east side is at this end, at the right end of the graphic. West Hills are to the left end of the graphic. So eastbound traffic pursuing down Burnside, westbound. North end of Pearl District up here, downtown below. Does that help?
Yeah, so where does the project begin and end on Burnside, and what does the red dotted line stand for?
Okay, bear with me. The red will be what came out of the Pearl District Access Plan that was adopted in September.
Okay.
Burnside starts 3 locations. It's 12th Avenue, 4th Avenue, and 3rd Avenue. And they're site-specific to intersections. And I'll get to those in a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one up in the Pearl District, I'll move through these pretty quickly. Northwest 13th is a unique street with, if you've ever walked down it, it's curbless, it's heavily pedestrian-oriented. It has stop signs at every intersection, including Everett and Gleason. The problem there is Everett and Gleason are collector roads, which have high volumes, high speeds at times. It's hard to get a gap to cross. You'll see in the graphic, we've got signals at 12th and 14th. What is not there on our nice pedestrian street is a signal on 13th. So the plan here proposes to add signals and provide better access across there. Couch and Broadway. So you all probably have been through this intersection since last spring. This is our highest crash rate in the city for as far as intersections, which is to say, if you take the number of crashes and do a ratio against the number of cars that move through it, that would be what we call our highest crash rate. We back in the spring, we decided to implement four stop signs. That has had some success, not this level of success we would like from a safety standpoint. As well, it's created a little bit of congestion being one block off of Burnside. So plenty of stakeholders have told us this needs to change. So we were proposing to signalize this intersection. A note here, we are paying for this with system development charges as it's not in the district. I'm going to take you up to the brewery blocks here. We're proposing to signalize the brewery blocks at 11th and 12th of Couch. If you've all been there, it is a highly successful area, which creates a high level of congestion from pedestrians and vehicles. So the proposal here is to signalize the intersection to better provide flow and increase safety from the pedestrian standpoint. One note as well, currently the brewery blocks are one-way between Couch and Davis at 12th. This proposal would convert it to a two-way so you can have better access down to the brewery blocks from the north end of the Pearl District. Back to, so Commissioner Strauss, this is what you were talking about. So I'm going to talk about the left turns off of Burnside at this point. So we're going to start up at 12th and Burnside. And note here, so when we did the analysis of Burnside only project, which is again our internal study, the highest intersection, well, when I consider the brewery blocks, the highest intersection that had the highest demand for left turns was 10th Avenue. We looked at that as at first. The issue that came up there was there's just a lot of stuff going on at 10th Avenue. There's a streetcar, there's a heavy ped volume with Powell's Books. So we've backed off of 10th Avenue, and the next best location is 12th Avenue. What we're proposing at 12th Avenue is what we call a lagging left, or a through left. And how this would work is we have tight constraints as far as the right-of-way, so we can't create what we normally would do as a left turn pocket. So if you've ever been to Selwood Moreland, at the east side of the bridge, this is sort of what we call a lagging left. So what would happen is the signal would operate as you see it today. At some point, though, westbound traffic would be held at the, we would hold it at a stop, and then this would allow a green arrow to come on and left turns would occur. Our traffic analysis, which you all should have, states that during the PM peak, this would create a congestion issue. So what we're proposing to do is we would prohibit the left turns during PM peaks when we know we have congestion issues. We would be doing that with active signage. I don't have a graphic of what that active signage would be. Other cities use it. We've used it on the bus mall. So, but basically, it would be a lighted sign that would come up that would say, "No left turn," and that left arrow would never come up. So it would operate today as it does today in a PM peak. Okay, so now I'm going to take you down to 3rd and 4th Avenue. I'm showing these two intersections together because they somewhat are, from a design standpoint, they're reciprocal of each other. So the first item that what we do here is we create a left turn pocket adjacent to what is the existing median. Now, as we create the left turn pocket, we still need, because these are heavy use intersections, we still need to have the same amount of flow that moves through it. We would move the through lanes curb tight, which has an impact, the impact being that we have to remove what's now existing parking. And in the case of 4th Avenue, a TriMet stop. We'll get to that. We're mitigating for that. So after we create the through lanes curb tight, then at that point we have the left turns. As far as the bus stop goes, we've worked with TriMet. We've talked with them about whether the feasibility of moving this. They're on board with moving it. They have their own operational issues on Burnside, and they would expect that their users would go down to 2nd Avenue and 6th Avenue to use the existing stops there. We're improving 2nd Avenue as far as ADA access to help with that. Parking mitigation, I'll get to that, but we are looking at adjacent streets to mitigate the existing parking. Am I forgetting anything? I think that's it. So here's the parking mitigation. So in the red box, this is where we've removed parking for the time being. It runs between 1st and 5th Avenue. The green box is sort of areas where we've identified a strategy. Now, what I'm not showing is the traffic engineers spoke today about a little higher up in the neighborhood, we have another additional area where we can add parking. But, so if I can get your attention to the left side, this is just one example of what we'd probably do 3 or 4 blocks adjacent streets adjacent to this area. the idea, the strategy is that we would take off what is now an existing travel lane. This is 2nd Avenue between Burnside and Couch. We would take off this travel lane, and modify what we have parallel parking to angle parking. In this case, in this situation, we're going from we're going to add 6 parking spaces going to angle parking over parallel parking. We take this strategy, we're applying it over at 3rd Avenue between Ankeny and Ash by Voodoo Donuts, as well, what you're seeing here from Burnside to Couch, but also to Couch to Davis. This is really Monday's numbers. We were losing 22 spots for the project on Burnside, but you can see how we add back. And as of Monday night, we were at 18 total parking spots relocated with a net loss of 4. Again, today I was told we may potentially get 6 more spaces a little higher up in the neighborhoods. This is sort of an overview of where the whole project, when you look at the total project, again, design and engineering IGA was implemented in September. We're asking for this construction IGA to go through today for 1.8 of PDC, 210,000 from our system development charges, with the total project cost of about 2.5. Next steps, assuming we get a positive vote today, we'll be at City Council tomorrow to wrap things up on city's end. Design, we're currently at 30%. We anticipate being at 100% in March, April, and then April we go to bid with construction starting this summer, and about this time next year we'd be implemented. Any questions?
Before we go to questions, we do have Patrick Gortmaker signed up from the Old Town Chinatown Land Use Committee to testify. So why don't we have Patrick come up and...
And Chair Andrews, I just wanted to introduce one additional item into the record.
Okay.
We received, since the staff report was prepared, we received a letter from the Prem Group expressing some concerns with the project. Their overall summary of it is that they feel they need a little bit more detailed traffic analysis before moving forward. I'll hand this to Lois to pass out.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you. I'm Patrick Gortmaker with Calvert Company. I represent the Old Town Chinatown Neighborhood Association Land Use Committee. Well, as you know, several issues go back for many, many years in Old Town Chinatown, but the one that goes back to the very beginning of the 1997 Visions Plan and the 1999 Development Plan is, of course, the Burnside-Couch couplet. Breaking down the barriers, pedestrian safety, and access have been critical to and a challenge of the development goals of this neighborhood. Since 1997, PBOT has been scoping and planning work required for the Burnside-Couch couplet, all the way through the unanimous 2002 vote at City Council supporting the Burnside-Couch master plan. We've seen several variations, of course, since that time. And the plan we finally see today takes some positive steps in breaking down those barriers and access for our district. I also think that PBOT needs to ensure that the work proposed under this West Burnside Safety and Access project achieve the greater goals of the still adopted Burnside-Couch couplet plan. As for Old Town Chinatown, the signalization at Burnside and 4th finally gives northbound access off of Burnside as you move eastbound on Burnside. This is critical access running from Burnside all the way to Gleason, and something that we've been looking to do since 1997. The signal at Broadway and Couch, I think, as Ross pointed out, those funds don't come from the TIF funds, but it's critical to the bottleneck that we have at that four-way stop sign at that location and aligns with the signalization along Couch. And finally, the signal at Burnside and 3rd Avenue south to downtown. While critical, we were concerned about the loss of parking on the north of Burnside, which you saw in the diagram. We're working on a no net loss parking strategy in the district. Ross showed you plans to implement strategies to pick up those lost parking spaces. That's the first time we've seen that, so it's a very positive step. I do see that there's still a loss of 4. We'd like to get a no net loss. So in the end, how does this fit into economic development and cluster strategy? Infrastructure is not part of the economic development and cluster strategy, but I have to tell you, those blocks along 4th Avenue and 3rd Avenue are so delicate with all of their historic resources. The continuation to break down those barriers to redevelopment and renovation are critical, and access and public safety is important. Of course, the investment in the Grove Hotel by David Gold and his investors, and the critical restaurant and retail shops around 4th Avenue, that will be greatly helped by that turn. And of course, Block 33 is another great example. When Uwaj Maya was looking to locate there, the Burnside Couch couplet was a huge impact to the success of that project. So these signalization improvements will be important to the continued economic success of Old Town. And by this commission approving these funds, we can take the next steps to hopefully help Old Town Chinatown achieve more of our vision and economic development goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Patrick?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, you bet.
Are you going to be here in case there are some other questions?
I will.
Stick around for a couple of minutes, all right? Do you come back to the table? I just wanted to start. I had heard that we had gotten some other letters or questions, but I hadn't seen anything. PBA was one that I'd heard of. Has there been other public questions and testimony, or?
I've been to the PBA twice, Transportation Committee twice. I've been to Old Town Chinatown's Transportation Committee twice, the regular Neighborhood Association meeting once. So other than that, we did get a letter from the PBA indicating that there was concerns about parking loss. There was concerns about congestion off of the left turns and what it, and how that impacts the downtown. We are mitigating the parking loss. We have a strategy for mitigating the congestion. Whether or not it meets everyone's expectations is still to be seen. We're still only at 30% design, so we're working towards those, what they laid out for us.
And Chair, to answer your question, no, we haven't received any other correspondence.
Okay. With regard to the Prem Group question in particular, actually, it was kind of one that I had. I'm more used to seeing traffic analysis that talks about the through times, and there's actually a ranking for intersections,
right,
with regard to their effectiveness. But we didn't get to that level. Is that because we're only at 30% drawings? I mean,
DKS analysis did provide a V over C ratio for each intersection. We're mitigating based on their recommendations and their analysis. For instance, on 12th Avenue, we would be prohibiting the left turn based on their V over Cs and what they would project forward during the PM peak. Down on 3rd and 4th Avenue, there's a few, again, PM peak being the one time where we would be increasing over the threshold of 1. And I'm not a traffic engineer, so I couldn't tell you exactly what 1 means, but in those cases where we are above 1, we have some strategies, and it's in both cases on 3rd and 4th, it deals with the eastbound, back up here, it deals with the eastbound pedestrian movement here. So for instance, on 4th Avenue, this is currently closed in its existing conditions today. We would propose to keep it open, or to open it up again. The movement that's coming from north and then taking an eastbound movement, again, most people do this as they leave in the evening, that would start to approach 1 and then just barely go over 1. We could keep this closed, but from a design team standpoint, it's just barely on the edge, and we don't see why we would. We would like to open that to provide better access. There's not really a safety issue at this point. It's a slight congestion. I can tell you we do have intersections all over the central city where we are operating over 1 just because that's how things have evolved in the central city. So being close to that number, we're comfortable keeping this one open, or opening up this pedestrian lane. Over here on Northwest 3rd, again, at the PM peak, we have, I can't remember the exact number, but it's like 1.22. The reason for that is in order to make the left turn, we're taking green time away from the through movement for the opposing movements. In other words, again, trying to get out of downtown. We're still wrestling with that one. The easy answer is we close off this eastern leg of the pedestrian crossing. If we chose to do that project-wide, we're at sort of a net loss of 0 as far as pedestrian access. We've just moved the deficiency 200 feet down. to the east. Again, we're not comfortable yet sort of taking that off. We're designing as if it would be implemented. We'd like to sort of put it on the ground and see how it does operate. Modeling is pretty efficient, but there are times where it doesn't quite operate how we expected. So that's sort of what we're looking for as far as mitigation of the congestion issue at the 3 left turns.
Well, I'll have to admit that I just have some concerns over, having spent this money, PDC's money, and ending up with kind of a traffic disaster there. And I'm not sure that I've seen enough that makes me feel entirely comfortable with it. Charles, I'll start with you.
I think you summarized where I ended up after the briefing. There were just some questions that made me wonder, when you say we're still wrestling with things, is it a wrestling with let's test it, or a wrestling with if we had more time we'd have a better answer, particularly when we note that we're at 30% design?
I think it's both of those. When we get to 100% design, there's a lot of unknowns that we will have nailed down, so our confidence level goes up.
How much do we lose by giving ourselves more time to answer these questions more thoroughly?
As far as stopping
Are we
engineering?
concerned about increased cost, or if we say, and I'm asking you, how much more time is more time that gets us more comfortable or gets us closer to 80 to 90% design?
So where I stand on that was, we have a design budget. We're designing to 100%. I think at 100% we'll have our answers. And then it comes down to, is PBOT comfortable with implementing the 3rd Avenue at crossing? And then again, ultimately, are you guys comfortable issuing a construction IGA with us?
And how long does it take us to get to that?
We will be there in April, 100% in April.
Okay.
And we would not lose any time moving forward as we are moving today.
Okay. Well, and that kind of puts me where Chair Andrews is. It just seems like it's such a critical area, and there's some pretty large questions still open that it's probably more prudent to take the time if it doesn't cost us a whole bunch to take that time.
Understood.
Commissioner Strauss?
Well, I'm all for improving what I think is really a gateway to the city of Portland. This is an area that I think is currently not safe. Frankly, I'm uncomfortable to walk on the street down there, especially when it's late at night. And I think there's a lot of street improvements that need to be done on Burnside. So I would look for a much bigger vision. If it were up to me, I would say a budget between $5 and $8 million is necessary to really make the street improvements on there that are appropriate. And some of the things that I think should be considered first, I don't see anything about the street trees that are currently there. There's currently a large number of street trees,
right.
I think down the center and both sides of the street. So I'm interested what's going to happen to those street trees. I'm wondering whether it's appropriate to have security cameras down on Burnside. I don't know that we can have active police involvement down there, but something needs to be done to make that environment more secure. I don't know whether people should be looking into security cameras to help that situation. The TriMet stations that are down there, one is a new one, but most are sort of old and antiquated. I don't think there's enough lighting. I don't think there's enough security on there. And then just the lighting on that street in general for what I consider to be a gateway to the city of Portland. I'd like to see a lot more lighting on that street to create a sense of security. So I'm big on the project, but I just think we need a bigger vision. I don't know whether planning or some landscape design needs to be incorporated. I just think this is an opportunity to really energize that area, create new developments down there, create a safer environment, and allow the connection between both sides of Burnside so people feel very comfortable walking from one side to the other side of the city.
Okay. I don't disagree with a lot of that. Right now I'm working within the budget that I have. I know you and I, we did a briefing for Commissioner Strauss earlier in the summer, and we talked about the urban design. When we went back and looked at whether we should add that and how we could add that, right now our budget is limited on how much more we can add to the project as far as urban design. But we're working within the design guidelines of Old Town, Pearl District, just to sort of maintain the level that's expected in those development areas.
And Lou, as I understand, there is money within this urban renewal area to increase the funding up to $5 or $8 million by reapportioning it from other projects. Is that correct?
That would be your decision, Commissioner. The budget will be coming up for the 13-14. River District is a district that has more cash flow than most.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mullis?
Thank you. And I guess I would pretty much just echo Commissioner Wilhoit's remarks. If if it's not going to cost us additional money to slow down a little bit, let you get farther into the planning, do a little better analysis, maybe try and fix some of these issues. And I'm interested in Commissioner Strauss's vision as well. I think we're all just better off taking a deep breath and stepping back and letting the process move forward a little bit further and hearing from you again in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm hearing we might want to table this for a month.
I would say yes.
Yeah, I would just suggest that there is some funds that are expended towards evaluating a larger vision and fast tracking it. We need jobs in Portland. This is a great infrastructure project for the city of Portland. I'd like to see something to move forward quickly, not be delayed ad infinitum.
Do you need a motion to table, Mr. Chair? Is it just...
Yeah, I think that would, yeah, let's go there.
Chair, you said 1 month. I believe the PBOT said they would need until April to finish the design. Did you want to wait until that point, or did you want to hear it sooner?
You know, I think what I'd like to do is, we won't set a time for it at this point, and what I'd really like to do is give each one of the commissioners an opportunity to talk to you about what they would like to see, so that there's enough time to answer those questions too. I mean, I think everybody here supports it. We just want to make sure that it's going to be really successful. And I think, although I appreciate Steve's comment with regard to there is more money in that district, it does not, as you pointed out, or as Actor Patrick pointed out, it's a little bit out of our economic development strategy as well, which I also think means that we need to be a little bit more careful about taking a look at it. So there is a motion to table with no specific time.
Correct, just until the
But April
chair and
would be-
executive director feel it's appropriate time to bring it back.
Perfect. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Thank you.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Good presentation. Again, I think it's something that we support, just want a little bit more, a little better understanding. Okay, I've got 2 agendas here, make sure that I'm onto the right one. The next one is information item update on the Veterans Memorial Coliseum. Is Peter? Peter, okay. Peter and Eric. We'll just hold on for a second. No, thank you, I'm fine. Sure.
I'll take a little water if you can.
After 10. I know, you're gonna burn it, huh? You're gonna feel it too. Pretty soon you're gonna hit the wall. I have a LifeWorks Northwest meeting to chair at 7. Oh dear, ooh. Be a long day for you. So why don't we just go on a 5-minute break instead of, I'm not sure when, thought he was gonna come down at 4, but we will adjourn until 4:30. Adjourn here.
Bring Sarah Hart-Cole back so you can talk
Thanks
really
for
fast.
coming down, Peter. I was gonna start with this, and this shouldn't take very long, but since I was out of town for the last city commission meeting, I wanted Peter, who was representing PDC, to be able to report on it. Commissioner Strauss, as you know, at our last board meeting, we actually passed a resolution in support of this. And I think, as you know, the day we filed, or the day after we filed at City Council for this to be heard at City Council, the Western Hockey League came down on the Winterhawks and sanctioned them for some transgressions from their point of view, and I won't go into the details. We had worked, and I want to thank Peter and the rest of the staff. That weekend, we worked from 8 in the morning until after dinner, both Saturday and Sunday, to be able to get the documents to signing. But what that did was actually make both the owner of the Winterhawks, as well as City Council, as well as Portland Arena Management, want to step back and assess what this really meant to the future of the Winterhawks, and also get better clarification from the Western Hockey League as to what their final intention would be with regard to those sanctions. And I understand that that's in process. That hasn't happened yet. Again, the project that has been presented to you in the past in terms of price, in terms of scope, has not changed. The timing obviously has changed because time has moved on, and it is a 2-year project. So we would be looking not to be able to finish it, even if it was approved this month, until the winter of 2014. from my point of view, at this point, it's a decision to be made at the, from more at the Winterhawks, obviously, we're involved. But the deal doesn't go forward unless there's $10 million of investment by the Winterhawks. And our deal doesn't take place for 10 years. So it's even more important for both OMF and the city to be comfortable with the situation as well as PAM, because they have the risk of the loss for the next 10-year period. So none of that has actually changed since our meeting a couple weeks ago. Peter, could you update us in terms of what happened last week?
Sure. Peter Englander, Central City Manager. Chair Andrews, welcome back. Members of the board. What happened last week was a review at City Council of the responses that staff had provided to City Council from their questions the week before. They had had a number of questions the week before, same day that you took action, and we responded to those questions in writing. Those responses are in your board packet. It seemed to me that the discussion last week circled around clarity on a couple of different matters, one of which was a better understanding by City Council members about the value of the real estate that was under consideration for the option agreement, which is the second ordinance that City Council would consider, the first ordinance having to do with the redevelopment agreement itself. So there was some discussion about the value of the land being transferred, and there was some clarification at the meeting, and there's some additional clarification that we wanted to make. But one of the statements that the mayor made at the meeting was that it is not unusual for land to be transferred between the city and the Portland Development Commission, and he brought up the example of the Housing Bureau and how some $20 million worth of real estate had been transferred to the Housing Bureau just a few years ago. What we want to clarify a little bit more is we don't know the value of the land. We haven't done an appraisal, and the properties have encumbrances that are associated with leases and operating agreements. So it's a fairly complex determination of what the value of the land is being transferred. So we furthered that discussion a little bit more and provided some clarification to City Council members. The other questions had to do primarily around the parking district that was being proposed as part of the option agreement. I'll just remind you quickly that the parking district was augmenting the already established Lloyd parking district in a way that would upgrade a number of the meters and provide the flexibility for event pricing. This is something that's done around Gerald Winfield, and partnership between the Bureau of Transportation and the Lloyd Transportation Management Association is in favor of implementing a similar type structure at the Lloyd District. And there were some additional considerations in the option agreement that would help support the Spectator Facilities Fund in the event that we started to redevelop some of this real estate, specifically the Benton lot, most notably, and then to some extent the parking garages as well on a temporary basis. The implementation of the parking district would be able to use or the proposal was to use the incremental increase in a way that would help support the Spectator Fund to some amount. The parking district money in the Lloyd District does get split between the Transportation Management Association and the Bureau of Transportation, but some amount of that incremental parking revenue could go into a fund that would help support the Spectator Fund when we develop the Benton Lock, or when that was to take place, or if it took place, as well as any temporary situation at the parking garages. The option agreement that we have states that we will ensure that there are at least 98% of the 1,100 parking spaces that are in the east-west garages, but we are allowed to work on a temporary basis if we so chose to redevelop some portion of those garages in a way that might temporarily limit the amount of parking that we had there. City Council's major interest was to make sure that there had been enough stakeholder input to that part of the proposal, and so there was some amendment to the ordinances that would give the Bureau of Transportation a year to come back with a more thorough proposal on that parking district itself.
Any questions for Peter at this point? I will point out that since there were only 3 of us at the meeting, it was a conditional. Had 30 days, so it still isn't effective, our action from the last meeting. Thank you, Peter, and again, thank you so much. You have put so much time and effort into this, and I really appreciate it. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to adjourn the regular session right now and go into executive session. The Portland Development Commission will now meet in executive session for the purpose of deliberating with persons designated by the Commission to negotiate real property transactions regarding Old Town lofts. Executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602E. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. Now,